Thanks so much, Javier. As I said, I miss you on Sunday morning talk shows. I hope you drop by occasionally on Sunday and talk to me. At any rate, it gives me a great deal of pleasure and honor to introduce a very good and close friend of mine. He was a former Speaker of the Assembly. He was the 41st Mayor of the City of Los Angeles. He really needs no introduction because he's a respected voice in American politics. He's a candidate for governor next year. He's a guy that brings people together, Republicans, Democrats, all kinds of people, all ranks of people. He did a great job as mayor in transportation and crime reduction, infrastructure building, energy and resource sustainability, right-sizing government, business development, education reform. I had the privilege of serving as his appointee on the MTA board for 4 years and the Metropolitan Water District board for 4 years. Ladies and gentlemen, truly an outstanding Californian and American. Please welcome Antonio Villaraigosa.
What a nice introduction. I wrote every word myself. Dave, thank you. I've had an opportunity to work with Dave over the years, an appointee on the Metropolitan Transportation Authority at a time when almost no one thought it was possible to build a subway to a sea, a light rail to Santa Monica. No one really thought that we could do it. And I want to acknowledge you and thank you for Measure R. I want to thank all of you for Measure M and what you've been able to do, the commitment to housing and transportation. I've worked with so many of you, Tracy, of course, over the years, Randall, Mike. I mean, it's unlimited the number of people I've worked with here. So it's great to be here with you. And let me talk, first of all, you heard two great representatives, one in the Congress and the other, our Attorney General, kind of recap for you the first 100 days. And I'll add to that and then talk a little bit more about California. But let me, from my perspective, and, right after the election that morning, before Hillary Clinton tweeted or the president, I said, we have to work with him where we can and fight him where we have to. The two of them later on said something to the same effect. As Javier said, elections have consequences. Donald Trump won the election. But almost from the beginning, as Javier said, I think very well, you've seen this perpetual campaign. You've seen a number of things in the area of immigration, the wall, the ban. I think Congresswoman Chu said it really well. This isn't ideological, everybody. You have to know there will be an economic impact to a ban. She shared with you. I don't know if you remember, I would have a press conference every time I could get a nonstop daily flight to Los Angeles. You know why? There's a $623 million a year impact to the Southern California economy when you have a nonstop international daily. They're not going to be coming as much as they used to. That's just a fact. She shared with you, Congresswoman Chu shared with you, the impact over the next 2 years on tourism. You'll see an impact on foreign direct investment. When I went to China, when I went to Asia, I brought back investment here downtown and throughout the region. Let me be clear, that money will begin to dry up, and that's just a fact. I'm not just saying it. others have chronicled what the impact of a ban, a wall, and trade. You know, I have a difference of agreement with some of my own colleagues among the Democrats, but also with President Trump. I tell people 9 out of 10 new markets are outside of the United States of America. The notion that we would not be trading with China, Japan, Korea, Mexico, and Latin America is insane, because no state will benefit more from trade than California. This has to be the BizFed's issue. So this isn't just partisan from my vantage point. In fact, it's not partisan. It's not ideological. This is about, or it's not just ideological and philosophical. This is about the economic impact of some of these policies on trade, on tourism, on foreign direct investment. And let me share a few other things, because Attorney General Becerra mentioned immigration. 57% of high tech is foreign born. 44% of the businesses that are started in this town are foreign born. What people don't understand, this is the epicenter of the foreign born in the United States of America. And guess what? Our economy has thrived because of it. 6th largest economy in the world. We trade with Asia and Latin America. They send us their best and their brightest who build our businesses. Number one, first-time home buyers, Latino and Asian. I mean, the notion that we would round up these people, put up walls, is not just goes against the grain of who we are as human beings. It doesn't make economic sense for us. And I want to speak to that because you're the BizFed. And you all have to understand, it's not just tech. It's construction. It's the service economy. You look at some of the most vibrant, it's ag. You look at some of the most vibrant parts of the California economy, and yes, there are a lot of foreign born there, as there have been for more than a century in this great country. So I want to speak to the impact of the first 100 days and what it's going to mean to us. And I'm glad we have an Attorney General who's going to stand up for the environment. I'm glad we have an Attorney General who's going to stand up on the issue of immigration. And I'm glad that we have a legislature, a governor, and elected officials in this state who are going to stand up for the notion that California is going to chart a different path. Our path understands that diversity has been our strength. You know, you greeted me very warmly. And maybe because almost every day of the 8 years I was mayor, I used to say, this is the city of America's hope and promise. This is the city where we come from every corner of the earth to live our dreams. And this is that state. And so we're going to have to stand up on those issues going forward. But you know, I think there's a better way to take on the politics and the policies of Washington, D.C. And that is, we're going to have to double down on what we do here and do it better. You know, prior to my announcing for governor, I went up and down the state. I didn't need to go to L.A. and, you know, the L.A. metropolitan area. I grew up here. I was in the team post and been in Watts and South L.A. long before I became mayor. I had gone to the Valley, you know, since I was a kid. I knew the San Gabriel Valley, Pomona, and, you know, Orange County. So I went up and down the state, 26 of the 51 days in the Central Valley. Spent 5 days in the Inland Empire. Went up and down, and you know what I saw? You know, yes, there's a California rebound. And yes, we're the sixth largest economy in the world. And yes, we've created more jobs than Texas and Florida combined. But you know what? That rebound's not occurring everywhere. And that's just a fact. 77 of the top 300 cities with the highest poverty rate are in California. 3 of the top 5 cities with the highest poverty rate are in the Central Valley. LA is 14th in the nation. San Bernardino is 9. Best way we could take on the noise, the politics, the policies of Washington, D.C. is do a better job here. We've got to invest in our kids again. I've said, you know, part of the reason why we lost that last election, we're not focused on the economy. We're not focused enough on creating strong middle-class jobs that give people a vibrant middle-class life. I think that this state is going to have to take stock of just how well we're doing. Look at what's wrong with looking at our regulatory framework and seeing where we can improve it so we can grow our small businesses, so we can create more jobs. Why aren't we focused enough on educating our kids at a time when our economy is predicated on intellectual capital? It's all about what you have in here. So when I was mayor, we had a 44% graduation rate, and I said unacceptable. And this state has to stand for the notion that we've got to be what we were in the early 1960s when I went to school. We've got to have the best schools in the nation. We got to compete with the best minds in the world. We're going to have to double down on improving the quality of our schools, training our teachers, bringing technology into our classroom, setting the highest standards. We'll be 1 million down in the number of college graduates we need by 2025. 1 million down, another million, in the number of people with specialized skills. We're going to have to educate our kids, and we're going to have to train them. In some cases, that'll mean training for good jobs that you could work with your hands. But we also know you don't need a BS in engineering to be a coder or a BS in biology to work in the health sciences. We got to train people for where the growth is. Infrastructure, which is why I thanked you from the beginning. You've understood from the very beginning. A great way to give a shot to the economy is to build infrastructure again. And yes, look, I know it wasn't popular with a lot of people what the legislature did on raising the gas tax. But no, there had been bipartisan support for a gas tax in this country since the 1950s. Both parties have failed to raise the gas tax at a time when our infrastructure is crumbling. Where will I build on what they've done and be smarter? The same thing we did with America Fast Forward. You know, we've got to encourage cities and counties that are putting up their own money like we are to put up their own money. So the state ought to be providing through its Economic Development Bank, low-cost loans, low-cost bonds that reward cities and counties that are putting their own money up. Everywhere around the world, and some of you know I spoke around the world when I left the mayor's office. Everywhere around the world, the private sector is participating in infrastructure. Everywhere. This is the only country where we're not doing it. In a world of high deficits and debt, when we have budgets that are bloated and, you know, kind of not quite making ends meet, we got to think out of the box, everybody. We've got to look at the opportunity that comes with public-private partnerships. And lastly, you know, if you could get an exemption to build a football stadium, a CEQA exemption. Why can't we do that for major infrastructure projects that rebuild our infrastructure again? So, very clearly, we've got to do a better job at what we've done. Environmental standards, I said that we're going to stand up. But if you remember something we did here, by the way, 28% reduction in carbon emissions while I was mayor, #1 American city, #5 in the world. But we didn't just set high standards. We created green jobs. The next governor of this state is going to have to work with the BizFed, the chamber, the unions. We're going to have to create green jobs. Then you get a buy-in. When people see there's a benefit from having the highest environmental standards in the nation, not just a public health benefit, but also a real job benefit, people's going to say, yeah, we need to do that. Yeah, that makes sense. So we're not just going to be setting standards. We're going to be focused on using our universities to leverage their technology, their intellectual capital, to leverage technology to create good jobs. You know, the next governor of the state is going to have to understand, as this governor understands, first and foremost, you got to balance your budget. You know, I love when people say, I'm for this and I'm for that, and I'm going to give you this and I'm going to give you that. And that's part of the reason why people are so cynical about politics. You know, if you put something forward, you got to figure out how to pay for it. And that's not a radical notion, everybody. You know, you do that in your own homes. You know, a vacation in the summer, maybe one in the holiday season. Maybe the next year, it's only the summer. Maybe there's no vacation. We've got to balance budgets. We've got to look at how we become more sustainable going forward. So I don't want to go on and on. I'll just say this. I was honored to be the Speaker of the California State Assembly. I had a tough job, the first from Los Angeles. And by the way, since then, they have all come from the Los Angeles area. I understood we were the biggest city coming from the biggest region in this state. We needed that kind of representation. I had the honor of being your mayor, and it was an honor, one that I will never, ever forget. There is nobody in this race that has had those two jobs, that has had the kind of experience that comes in the middle of a recession when we were looking at a bankruptcy straight in the face. We got out of that crisis, and we got out of it working together. We got out of it because we had to make the tough calls, not the ones that keep you popular, but the tough calls that you have to make so that you can go forward. I think that's what we need as governor. I want to thank you for having me here, and I'll answer a few questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the audience? We have a question, and please tell us your name and your organization, and then hand me your business card.
Yes, good morning. I am Ambassador Dr. Zaira McLeod from the International Black Chamber of Commerce. And my question to you is the same question that I asked the Honorable Judy Chun when she was outside. I didn't want to embarrass her, but what I do not understand is how is it that President Trump is paying, I understand, from my chamber, from Judy, 4.4 million plus just to travel to and from his place 3 days a week, every 3 days, and his wife. 4 million, yet he's cutting the budget of Obamacare for poor people, millions of people will lose their health care. Many millions of people will even die. I don't understand that. What am I missing? And I thought I understood politics, and I thought I understood the government, but I guess I don't. Perhaps you can explain it to me.
That's another area, and thank you for reminding me about the issue of health care. Folks, I've always said, I've said it since I first got it. Some of you, because not all of you lived in my district at the time, some of you sent me to Sacramento in 1994. Healthcare is a right, not a privilege. The only issue should be, how do we pay for it? How do we deliver it in the best way possible? That's another area where we're going to stand up, where we have to stand up. You know, California is going to mark a different path on the issue of health care. We want to move to universal health care for everyone, and we will.
We have another question here.
Sure.
Mayor Villaraigosa, my name is Ted Green. I'm a public affairs consultant based in West Hollywood. Thank you for being here.
It's great to be here with you.
You are competing against a number of other prominent Californians to be our next governor. In thinking about the campaign that lays ahead over the next year and a half, how do you think it'll be different now that Trump is president versus if Hillary Clinton had been elected, or if we end up with President Pence?
Well, obviously, I wanted Hillary Clinton to be president. But as I said, elections have consequences, and, you know, she's not president, and Donald Trump is. My hope would be that they'll realize the first 100 days have been almost a complete and abject failure, that they'll move in a more centrist and moderate course. If they do, as I said earlier, and I think the Attorney General said the same thing, you know, we ought to be prepared to work with them. But if they're going to continue over the next year, the year after that, and the year after that, what we've seen in the first 100 days, we'll use the courts. We will use every tool we have to say that California is going to mark a different path. A path of prosperity, a path that honors our diversity, that revels in it, a path that understands we have to trade with the rest of the world, a path that's building infrastructure, educating our kids, and training our kids to a better degree than we were doing before he got elected. So it's hard for me to speculate because I don't think anybody knows. I don't think he knows what he's going to do in the next 100 days. But my hope for the country, you know, I'm not a screamer. Started out in 1994 kind of being, you know, Democratic firebrand, but over time, you realize you got to have a balance. But there's no balance over there. We have never in our nation's history seen an administration like this one. And, you know, California is going to chart a radically different path. That's just a fact.
We have any other questions? Also, our speakers are going to stick around during the break, which is amazing. So if you have any questions one-on-one, they will still be here. So hold on a second. Can you state your name and your organization?
Cleo Hill Jackson with the San Fernando Valley Chamber. Yes. I'm their historian because I remember what happened back in the 50s, 60s when Tom Bradley was a policeman on the block. But when you were mayor, you saw the beginning and the middle of this homelessness that has just seemed like escalated by the month. From your point of view, is it possible within 5 or 6 years to curtail this? Is anything being done policy-wise that I can't see from the community point of view?
I think LA City and County stepped up in a big way with H and HH. I think it was important. I think there's a level of coordination and collaboration between the city and county that gives me cause to believe that we are going to make progress. I think the state is going to have to get in the business of putting together a housing trust fund that patterned after what I mentioned with transportation, is rewarding cities and counties that are putting up their own money. And looking at, obviously, the issue of homelessness, but also affordability. Too many people can't afford to rent an apartment, you know, a house. We're going to have to do something about that. I think the state looked at this issue of housing by right, and while it was rejected, I think we need to look at that issue again and work with our cities and counties to make sure that we're all stepping up to the plate to address the housing crisis, the affordability crisis, and then lastly, you know, everybody thinks when I first started in 2001 talking about a subway to the sea and we were going to do all of this, they thought I was just talking about transportation and traffic and congestion and air quality. It really wasn't. It was about reimagining this town. Look at downtown in Hollywood, increasingly Century City. We've got to leverage smart growth with transportation. So that's housing and transportation together. So the state's going to be a force. We need to put a trust fund together. We need to reward cities and counties that are putting up their own money. We need to look at the issue of housing by right. We need to look at what they call smart growth and transit-oriented development. Those are some of the things that we need to do with respect to housing. We can't just let cities and counties deal with a crisis that, as you said, has just mushroomed in a way. You know, if you ever watch TV on Thanksgiving or Easter or Christmas or any of those days, I'm always on Skid Row. And I'll tell you something, every month, it just seems to be getting worse and worse. So we've got to be committed. I think the city and county have stepped forward in a big way, and they ought to be acknowledged for that.
We have another question over here.
What about the mental part? Have you noticed?
Absolutely, yes. The mental health, you know, look, mental health, drug rehab, you know, when I took on the realignment way back when, it wasn't philosophical. I've been challenging the prison pipeline, the focus on prisons in this state for 25 years since I was the president of the ACLU. I took on 3 Strikes, You're Out in 1994. But we got to have services that come with this. Mental health, drug rehab, job training, you know. So you're going to see a focus on that from me. Because, you know, Javier, and you know, you all know the story, but, you know, I grew up in a home of domestic violence and alcoholism. I grew up poor. My mother gave me an education, and this great public schools, our public schools in this country gave me a second chance. We got to give people second chances again. We can't just give up on people. And I'm a big believer in that. And that's why I'm focused like a laser beam on education and training. And so, yes, mental health, drug rehab, you know, job training, you know, all of that is really important to address this. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Kathy McClure. I have my own firm, a small business. I part of the infrastructure and transportation for years. I'm also the chair of the Glendale Chamber of Commerce and the current chair of Women's Transportation Seminar, LA County. And I think our biggest concern being from a woman's perspective in small business is this administration, what are we looking at as the effects of small business, and particularly those out of the DBEs and some of our affirmative action programs? Are we looking at some possible changes in that area, or is there something we should be?
You're
paying-
saying